So open source is critical for the government because it gives government users freedom and control. Historically, government users have been very successful deploying open source on a variety of hardware platforms that is their choice, as far as whether it's x86 servers from a myriad of vendors to RISC processors to mainframe computers. And they've had the choice all along the way to pick the hardware target that is best suited for their workload and delivers the best value for them. And now looking into the future, when you start thinking about virtualized infrastructure as well as cloud computing, that value proposition gets extended even further. So now they have a choice of architecting a solution once using open source technologies and then deploying wherever they want, whether it's bare metal or virtualized infrastructure or cloud computing. The best examples that I've seen where customers are using open source is when they're an active participant in the open source process. Typically, we discourage customers from falling into the trap of the legacy model of buying proprietary software and using whatever a vendor gives them, and that's all they're stuck with. One perfect example that I like to use a lot is the SE Linux project that was started off by the National Security Agency. The National Security Agency wanted to develop a secure way to do operating systems in a mainstream operating system, and they were having all kinds of challenges in terms of using proprietary systems that would have security mechanisms that were bolted on as an afterthought. And as a result, they were very limited in what they could do with them, and they were also very, very expensive. So they came up with the SE Linux project back in 1999, and they developed this, and it worked really well in concept, and then they proved it out in code. But what really made it take off was whenever commercial entities like Red Hat, HP, IBM all rallied around the NSA to work with them to get it into a commercial offering. So now if you look at Red Hat Enterprise Linux, what we ship today, every unit that we ship has SE Linux enabled and enforcing using that technology that was built originally by the NSA. But the key benefit is that they were participatory in the process, but they also worked with a commercial vendor to help take it mainstream for long-term maintenance. So I see several big trends in terms of open source with government adoption, and it's largely in virtualization, cloud computing, and big data. So, and open source plays a role in all three of them. So if we take a look at virtualization, there are open source virtualization technologies that are out there that are going to be displacing a lot of the proprietary virtualization tools that are out there. So in the same way that people have migrated away from proprietary operating systems to more cost-effective open source operating systems that are faster, more secure, less expensive, people are starting to do that on the virtualization end. On the cloud computing end, open source plays another role there because it helps mitigate the risk of vendor lock-in. So if they develop on open source, they could deploy on bare metal virtualized infrastructure or cloud computing. And so by having them standardize on open source technologies, that gives them flexibility, freedom, as well as control. And then lastly, on the big data front, every project that people are doing in terms of big data, they're doing it using open source principles. And what's happening is instead of a commercial vendor coming up with an idea, productizing it, and then selling it to end users, it's the end users that are solving the problems and then developing code using open source principles, and then all of a sudden commercial entities are propping up to provide commercial support for them. So if you look at some of the big data databases, NoSQL databases, Hadoop, those were all started by people trying to solve problems, and what they did was they solved them using open source principles, got them out there, got a community around them, and now there are commercial entities that are out there providing commercial support to broaden the addressable market and user space for people that aren't the core developers. My advice for open source in the government, it's three things. It's to standardize, participate, and partner. So the first part is to standardize. If you standardize on open source technologies, what you're able to do is have the freedom and control to pick whatever type of deployment target you want, whether it is physical systems, virtual systems, or cloud systems. You have that choice and you have that control to be able to do that. The second piece of advice I recommend people to do is participate. So avoid falling into the trap of the proprietary software model of using software that's been given to you and trying to make the most of it, and instead get out in front of it and participate in the open source community, because that way the open source software providers that are out there can hear your feedback and get your input to be able to deliver products that better suit your needs. And lastly, the third part is to partner, and that builds upon the participation. So whenever you partner with an open source provider such as Red Hat, what you do is you get your voice heard and also amplified with the voices of other people in the open source that are taking advantage of open source technologies. So for instance, if you have a particular feature that you would like to have, you could absolutely go into the open source community and try to implement it yourself, but unfortunately you may not have the voice or the amount of people on staff to make that happen. By partnering with a commercial open source vendor like Red Hat, what you're able to do is talk to that open source provider, and who's hearing the voices of hundreds and thousands of customers that may have the exact same need that you do. And then what that does is it collects that feedback and allows our engineering team to be able to develop those solutions and get them upstream for you in a supportable way. One of the projects that we've been working on a lot is it's a project called the Aqueduct Project. And one of the challenges that customers have had is being able to do certification and authorization work. And it's been a pain point for them because it takes a very long time, it's very labor intensive, and a lot of times people don't have consistent ways to do it. And so what Red Hat has done is that we're applying open source principles to create a community of like-minded people to help each other do that CNA work. And so with the Aqueduct Project, what people are able to do is we have a form of people, so it's not just a vendor such as Red Hat or some other vendor dictating to the government how the best way to secure things. You have people from the vendors as well as people from the government helping each other out. And it's all done in an open community, and it allows people to be able to lock down systems in a very secure way, all using best practices, so we're not reinventing the same thing over and over again.